Uh, I don't have a direct answer to this question, except quoting an anecdote about China, about primitive China, and I will tell you what context that has to the theme of entrepreneurship and team building. The anecdote goes like this, that in ancient China, many hundreds of years back, Chinese people did not know how to cook the food. So what they would do, they would just kill the animal and eat the food raw. So one day, in one of the families of farmers, there were many pigs, goats, pigs, chickens, and all. And this farmer had to go to the town for purchasing something. So he gave instructions to his children to look after the family pig and all till he comes back home. And he went for his purchase. But meantime, because of an accident, the hut caught fire and all the pigs around also got roasted. So when the farmer got back in the evening, he saw that the smoke was billowing out of the hut, and he tried to retrieve whatever he could. And in that process, his fingers got stuck into the pork, which was roasted. As it was very hot, naturally he tried to put the fingers in the mouth, and it tasted delicious. They say that that was the point when they invented the roast pork. And from that point onwards, anybody who wanted to have roast pork started burning the houses. What is the moral of the story, moral of the anecdote? If you don't know why and how the pig gets cooked, you are going to burn a lot of houses. And that is the first message of my presentation today, that in understanding entrepreneurship, you need to know the why and how. Only then you'll be able to understand the importance of entrepreneurship and team building. I'm sure in your management studies you would have talked about, or your teachers would have told you about organization structure, different roles, and they would also shown you different organization structures as depicted in the boxes. Now that is the first problem of management, that sometimes these boxes become so rigid that each box tries to view the other not as their friend, not as their coordinator, not as their collaborator, but as their enemies. If you don't believe me, I will quote you a couple of examples where I was a consultant. The first example that comes to my mind was from Bangalore. We were consulting in the 80s for a large public sector undertaking, which was into manufacturing of defense equipments, radars and sensors, and those kind of very important defense equipments for our defense forces. And what we were trying to do, we were trying to find out what the research and development department thinks about the production department, what the production department thinks about the finance department, a kind of perceptions about each others in the very important public sector unit. So we did a very simple exercise. We got all these groups. R&D was sitting on one side, production was sitting on one side, HRD was sitting on one side, and we gave them the flip sheets, the big white sheets, and a sketch pen. And we told them that, look, you need to answer 3 questions. Very simple questions. We will not tell you what to write. Whatever comes to your mind, please write. The first one is, how do we see us? Means how the production department visualizes themselves. Very simple. Write whatever, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can write as many as you want. Second question, how do we see them? You need to now imagine, how do you visualize the other department? So R&D would say that, look, in my view, production department is like this. Production would say that, in my view, R&D department is like this. And the third was a slightly tricky question. How do we think they see us? I think that I'm good, but how about the other department? How do they think us? And then After 2 hours, they wrote all this about themselves, about others, and about what they think others see them, and we put them on the board. Would you believe that the production department wrote that we think that R&D department is an overhead in this company? Now just imagine, research and development for a defense company should be the most dependable kind of an ally. But here the production department is saying that R&D department is an overhead and we don't need R&D in this company. Alerted, we started probing as to why do you think that research and development department is an overhead? And you know what they told us? Whenever we ask for any feedback from the R&D department, we never get any feedback. Now, I found that very puzzling. So we checked with the R&D department as to why you guys are not sending feedback which you get from the production department to the production department. You know, R&D department told us that we regularly send feedbacks. Now that was the dilemma. So we again probed and we found out that R&D department was regularly sending the feedback, but they were sending it to the personnel department, hoping that the personnel department will forward it to the production department. Personnel department had no relevance for the technical report that they were getting from the R&D, so they filed it. So production never got it. Then we asked a question to R&D department, would it be problematic for you if instead of one copy, you print out 2 copies, send one to HR personnel department and another to production department? Is there any problem? They said, sir, there will be no problem. I said, then do it. Now the question was, did they need a consultant at a very hefty price to come all the way to tell them that you need to type extra copies? But that is the problem of team building, you know. I will give you another instance. In the same company, one evening, the chairman had called us for a dinner where all the sections will meet in an informal way to get to know each other. And in that dinner meeting, we heard a conversation that one person asking the other, are you Mr. Subramaniam? So this guy said, yes, I'm Subramaniam. Who are you? He said, I am Ramalingam. By the way, I am from R&D department and glad to meet you. You know, these guys are working in the same complex for the last several years, but they never had face-to-face contact. Now that is the irony of modern organizations. These boxes, the organizational roles, people define it so tightly that each department loses interaction and they don't become a team. The next example comes to me from a company which was my earlier company, a fertilizer company, where I was in the head office and in the corporate office, and just adjacent to the corporate office was the production department, which was designing the fertilizer complex, manufacturing urea and ammonia. The head of the production department was a very senior giant who was a well-known name in fertilizer industry. But the problem was that he protected his department as like some king, you know, protects his territory, which means the other departments were out of bounds. So whenever I used to go to his department, they would see me from the window and they would say, look, Dr. Raj is coming. Don't give him any information. Even if he asks for the time, tell him that it depends. You know, if this is the kind of collaboration, then team building goes out of the window. The third example I will give you, and I will name the company, which is Tata Motors. When it was Telco in Jamshedpur, we were consulting for this company, and every quarter we would be going to this company. And what was our task? Our task was to review the targets set by different departments. So, am I going too fast? Can anybody tell me whether my speed is okay or I need to go slow?
No, sir, it's okay.
Okay. Right. Okay. Now, listen, this is very interesting. Mr. Sarosh Gandhi was the executive director of this company. When we went there, there was a department which was manufacturing a particular component that goes into trucks. He was heading that department. He was the supervising manager. And the discussion was what is the target capacity, unit capacity of that particular division. So the supervising manager stood up and made a statement very solemnly that my capacity of my unit is 20,000 pieces. And everybody started laughing. Why they started laughing? Because in the last quarter, on an average, they had made 30,000 pieces. And here is the guy who is saying that his capacity is 20,000 pieces. So people started probing. We started probing. Why do you say it is 20,000 when you have actually produced 30,000? And he gave a classic answer. He said, I still maintain that the capacity of my unit is 20,000, but that extra 10,000 is because of the dedication and commitment of my boys. You asked me about my unit capacity, which is unit capacity is 20,000. We could not resolve that conflict. Then the next quarter, we again went there, but there was some change had taken place. What was the change? This supervisor who had maintained that the capacity of his unit was 20,000 and not 30,000 had been moved on to the other department, and his junior had now taken his place. Now the same discussion started, and surprise of surprises, the supervising manager who is now transferred is asking his junior who has now become the manager of his previous unit, now tell me what is the capacity of your unit. He said, sir, the capacity of my unit is 20,000. And this manager says, how do you say 20,000? Because in the last quarter you have made 30,000. His assistant was dumbstruck. He said, sir, you are asking me this question? All along when you were in my department, you maintained 20,000. And now you are asking me the same question? To which that manager replied that, look, that time I was in that department, but now I am in this department. So my loyalty now is to the other department. You understand what is the dynamics? People change their loyalty as soon as they sort of change their department. And the collaboration and coordination, which is the essence of team building, gets completely obliterated. Today's theme is about managers and entrepreneurs. Now, believe me, manager and entrepreneur are two sides of the same coin. There is actually no difference. What today we need is managerial entrepreneurship, or if you will, entrepreneurial managership. There is a management expert in Canada, Henry Mintzberg. I'm sure your professors would have taught about him. He wrote an article, Manager's Role, Myth and Reality. And he in this article, he made a statement that take any book on management and find out what is the role of management. You will find that a manager's role is planning, organizing, coordinating, controlling, and so on and so forth. He said, having studied so many managers in different countries, I have come to this conclusion that this definition of manager is far from reality. A manager wants to plan. A manager wants to control. A manager wants to lead. But a manager wants to plan. But the reality is the manager ends up reacting from moment to moment, because the pressure of work is so much that he ends up reacting to situations time and again. Now, when I talk about entrepreneurship, what do I mean? What is entrepreneurship? Basically, entrepreneurship involves several non-cognitive elements. What do I mean by non-cognitive? That is, you are born with that. What do I mean by that? You are very comfortable in that particular trait. That's your fundamental orientation. A successful entrepreneur, what does he need? Firstly, he needs seamless networking ability. You need to seamlessly interact with people. You need to be a people's man. In a business or in enterprise, you need to relate to people. You can't be a loner. You need to, but you can't go overboard also. So you need to relate to people who are relevant to your enterprise. Second one is simply relating to people is not important. You need to influence people. You need to be assertive. If I have something to communicate, I must have the ability to communicate. There is a difference between assertiveness and aggressiveness. I can't be pouncing on somebody. It is not a wrestling match that I have to win at your cost. So you need to have listening ability also, which means I need to assert my views, but I need to also have the ability to listen to others, listen to counter viewpoints. I'm sure you would have heard that proverb that God has given us 2 ears, but 1 mouth. Why? Because you have to talk less and listen more. Otherwise, God has given you 2 mouths and 1 ear. So there is some justice in God. The third dimension of entrepreneurship is need for achievement. There has to be fire in the belly. There has to be passion for work. The next dimension that you need to have is locus of control. This is a management concept, locus of control. What is locus of control? The question is, who controls your life? Who controls your life? Somebody will say that, look, Sai Baba controls my life, or Balaji Tirupati controls my life, or that holy man controls my life, or my luck controls my life, my fate controls my life. But there are many who would say that, no, I control my life. Whatever good or bad happens to me is a direct result of my own contribution or my own efforts. So these people are supposed to have what we call as the internal locus of control. But those who believe that the godmen or the gods or the luck or the fate control their life, they are supposed to have external locus of control. The entrepreneurs need to have what we call as the internal locus of control. The next dimension is metacognition. What is metacognition? You need to have the ability to reflect what you are doing and why you are doing. The continuous introspection, reflection, insight is an extremely important dimension of entrepreneurship. The other dimension of entrepreneurship is what we call as conscientiousness. Not consciousness, conscientiousness. What is conscientiousness? My ability to follow the rule book, my integrity, my truthfulness. I'm sure all of you must be watching Netflix and or Sony Live. There are 2 serials these days which are very, very popular. On Sony Live, there is a serial about Harshad Mehta. Harshad Mehta was a stock broker and who created a major scandal in the early 90s. And the second serial that is going on in Netflix is about the bad billionaires, which talks about Malaya and Nirav Modi and Sahara Head. Now these people were lacking conscientiousness. That is, they were only amassing fortune, hoarding only for their benefit. That is what they portray. We still do not know the full truth, but conscientiousness is an extremely important element of entrepreneurship. Your Professor Dash introduced me saying that I do a lot of work in Africa. What work I do? I work with the poor farmers in Africa. And I found, I tried to correlate between entrepreneurship and creditworthiness. What is creditworthiness? Your ability to pay back what you have taken the money from the banks. And we normally work with the banks, and we tell them that though this person is very poor, he doesn't have any collateral, but he's very honest. He has a lot of integrity, he's truthful, and he has entrepreneurial skill. So don't go by his present situation. This person has entrepreneurial ability, and given a chance, he can be a good entrepreneur. So conscientiousness is an important element of entrepreneurship. The next element is openness to experience. There are many people you would have come across who are like stuck in the mud type, which means once they form an opinion, that is final. They will not change the opinion even if the data points out to something new. These are the people who are stuck in the mud, as we call them. Whereas a true manager, an effective entrepreneur is very open to new experiences and effect mid-course correction. If he finds that his action is not producing desirable results, he is able to do mid-course correction. So this is about entrepreneurship. Now, what is the reality when we talk about team building? We talk about entrepreneurship. What is the reality that we see today? Let me touch upon these realities as well, and I will try to show you a PowerPoint, and then I'll try to explain. Now, tell me, once you see the PowerPoint, just tell me whether you're able to see that. Are you able to see the PowerPoint? Can anybody confirm?
No, sir. Please share. Please go for the share option, sir.
Okay. 1 minute. I'll share. Yeah, 1 minute. Is it now clear? Are you able to see?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, good. Now let me just explain. Now this is the problem of team building. I don't know whether you have seen this cartoon or not, but this represents the problem of team building. You know what has happened? Somebody somewhere has forgotten to do what he has to do, and now the track is completely wrong. And you see these two guys fighting with each other. They are the managers who sort of fighting, and the rest of the guys are workers, as if it is none of their business. Why this happens? Let me try to explain. The first problem with the team building is that we are operating in a world of double standards. Many years back, in an international conference in Singapore, I made the statement that we operate in a world of double standards. There was another speaker next to me from China, and he tapped on my shoulder and he said, "Doctor, you're very conservative. Please replace the word double with multiple." He said, managers have multiple standards. One set of yardstick to judge my performance, another set of yardstick to judge my subordinates' performance, a third set of yardstick to judge my superiors' performance. This is the problem with managers. That I often think that I'm perfect and rest of the world know nothing. This is a major problem that has implications for team building. The second reality is we're all 90% achievers. When I get 90% of whatever is expected out of me, I am greatly satisfied soul. I had worked in a fertilizer company many years back, and in fertilizer company, if the factory does not achieve 100% utilization in the first 6 months of production, people think that there is something wrong, which means 100 is your baseline. My niece got admission in many years back in this Shriram College of Commerce. She had 99 point some percentage, And I remember a case, you will not believe if I tell you, a guy from Nagpur, he got a total percentage of 102%. Is it possible to somebody to get 102%? He got 99% in physics, chemistry, maths. Then he got 2% because he took part in extracurricular activities. That became 101%. Then his grandfather was a freedom fighter, so he got 1 more percent. You add all that, it becomes 102%. So even 100% has gone out of the window. So this mindset of 90% achievers is really not going to take us anywhere. And today, the competition is not restricted to Orissa. The competition is not restricted to India. The competition is a global competition. And therefore, we have to be better than the best. The third problem seems to be that we prefer shortcuts. Whenever a detailed work is expected out of us, somehow there is a tendency to adopt shortcuts. Again, I'm reminded of my stint in fertilizer company. We were erecting the boilers in a place called Kakinada in Andhra Pradesh, and our head office was in Hyderabad. And there was some problem in the boiler erection. So we had written to the factory, the boiler factory in Japan, in a place called Nagoya, that please send your instructor, some technician, so that he can rectify the problem. One day I was sitting in my office and came in a young, Japanese people look very young, like Chinese, because of their stinted eyelids and all. He came and I realized that he does not speak English. I do not speak Japanese. So you can just imagine the kind of conversation that we would have had. After 15 minutes of wrestling with him, I figured out that this is the guy who has been sent from Japan to repair that boiler. The second thing I realized that thanks to Air India, his baggage was misplaced. So the guy had landed there with a briefcase. The third thing I realized, and that was the saddest part, that the guy had got married the previous week. And rather than sending him to honeymoon, his company had sent him, of all the places, to Kakinada. So the first thing I did was, I sent him to do some shopping, to buy some shaving blades and some such items. And I put him in Godavari Express. I gave instructions to my people in Kakinada that, look, this guy is coming. He may be a little disturbed because he has lost his baggage and he doesn't understand any language. So please take care of him, put him in the guest house. Next day morning around 10 o'clock, send a car, let him go to the factory. And I made sure that the guy reaches by train to Kakinada and he's put up in the guest house. Next day morning at 6:30 in the morning, I get a call in Hyderabad from the security guard in the factory that, sir, a foreign citizen is waiting to get into the factory. Should we allow him? I got surprised at 6:30. Who is this foreigner trying to get? So I said, give the phone. And I found that Sekijima, his name was Sekijima. He was on the line. You know what he had done? As soon as he landed in Kakinada, he had a cup of tea and then he went to the village, to the town, hired a car at a rate which was lower than what we had hired, asked the car to report at 6 o'clock in the morning, and 6:30 he's in the gate. And people tell me that when he went into the gate, he climbed up the ladder to the boiler, and 2 nights and 2 days he was standing there repairing that. No food, no tea, no break, nothing. That is the detailed work that the Japanese guys do. That is why they are the top guns. Contrasted that to many people who prefer shortcuts. The next reality is there is this phenomenon called groupthink. Many times there is this question that is asked that why do people come together? Why people have to form teams? Why people have to come together? And the answer is given that people come together because when they come together, there is generation of good ideas. But again, as I said, the reality could be different. And this is known as Abilene paradox. What is Abilene paradox? In 1950, in Texas, in America, when there was no TV or nothing, only radio was there, Texas is a very hot region. So a family comprising of father, mother, son, daughter-in-law, they were all sitting in a group, very hot, very sultry, and they were listening to music. Suddenly, the father-in-law says, how about going to Abilene for a nice dinner? Abilene is a place 100 miles away from that place, Texas. Suddenly, the brother-in-law says, why not? The son says, okay. The wife keeps quiet. The mother-in-law keeps quiet. And they all then huddle in the car and go to that Abilene to have dinner. The road is horrible. The place is very dusty. And to cap it all, the food is terrible. And they come back in the evening. Nobody is looking at each other. And suddenly the father-in-law looks and says, holy shit, why the hell did we go there? Now the son-in-law is surprised. He said, why? I thought you wanted to go there. The father-in-law said, no, I never wanted to go there. I was quite happy sipping beer in the room. I thought you guys are getting bored. They both now look at the lady. The lady says, look, since three of you wanted to go, I also went. You know the irony? None of them wanted to leave that place, but finally they ended up doing exactly that. This phenomenon is known as groupthink. In a group, somebody assumes that what is the point in talking? Everybody else is going to talk, so let me keep quiet. If everybody starts thinking like that, then you get into what is known as Abilene paradox. The next is, we spend little time on planning and have no idea what is time management. Planning gets less importance. Let me give you two examples of this. Many years back, I was part of a committee which went into reorganization of State Bank of India. You know, State Bank of India is world's largest bank in terms of branches. In those days, the State Bank wanted to reorganize itself, so they had appointed a committee, and I was one of the members of the committee. And what we did, we divided the State Bank into different circles. In those days, I think 9 circles, and each circle was to be headed by a group general manager. CGM, Chief General Manager, not Group General, CGM, Group Chief General Manager. And under Chief General Manager, we created 2 positions, General Manager Operations and General Manager Planning. Mr. Goyal was the chairman of State Bank of India, and he believed that banks need a solid think tank in terms of planning. And therefore, he wanted the very best people from State Bank to be appointed as General Manager Planning. And we created this, and these best people were picked, and they were appointed as General Manager Planning. You know, many people went to these GM Planning, we used to call them a GMP, to offer their condolences. He said, आप तो planning के general manager बन गए, अभी काम क्या है आपको? आप सिर्फ अपने रूम में बैठे रहेंगे. असली काम तो operations का होता है. तो सब लोग क्यों में खड़े हो जाते हैं लोन के लिए. People did not understand that planning is equally or more important than actual operations. That was a kind of a mindset, you know. So that is one of the problems of team building. The second one is very obvious. We fight our battles with the most modern weapon, emails. You know, email is very good, but sometimes it is also very bad in the sense it is used to settle scores, and that creates a major problem of coordination. Then the next one is we do not respect cost. You know, cost escalation is a major kind of issue. Too many meetings with very little output is again very obvious. The next one is quite important. We always find out who did it rather than how it happened. You know, whenever things go wrong, the natural tendency is ye kisne kiya and hang him. That seems to be the output, that's not the right way. This is not the way to prevent things. Let me give an example. You're all young students. You may know that at one point in time, Indira Gandhi was the Prime Minister of this country, a very, very able kind of a lady, and she was shot. That day, I was in Calcutta, and I had a meeting with the chairman of UCO Bank, United Commercial Bank. So in the morning, around 8:30, I left the hotel, and I was trying to enter the UCO Bank gate, and I could see a lot of crowd outside. Now in Calcutta in those days, outside the crowd was nothing unusual. Most of the time, people used to be out rather than in, working. So it was not very surprising. So when I tried to open the gate, they said, "आप अंदर नहीं जा सकते, आपने सुना नहीं क्या?" I said, "क्या हो गया?" Indira Gandhi has been shot. I said, "Really?" And then there was this boy, and lots of rumors were floating around. There was a small boy who had taken out the supplement of Telegraph is a newspaper from Statesman. Sorry, Statesman was a newspaper, and they had brought out a small one-sheeter which said that Indira Gandhi dead. And people started beating this boy. Rumor fela rahe ho. Because our All India Radio was announcing that yes, she has been injured, but nothing bad has happened. So there was total confusion. All the foreign embassies had put their flags low, as a mark of respect, because they knew that she is already dead. But All India Radio was still announcing that Indira Gandhi is being blood transfusion. Why was this confusion? Because her son, Rajiv Gandhi, was traveling along with our future president, Pranab Mukherjee, in West Bengal. And our president was Gyani Zail Singh, who had gone on a foreign visit to Yemen. So he was told that, look, Indira Gandhi has been shot. So he cancelled his trip and he is midway in the flight coming back to Delhi. Now, this kind of a situation is going on, and it is suddenly in the flight, Gyani Zail Singh was finally told by somebody that Indira Gandhi is dead. So what he did, he told his ADCs, his military assistants, attachés, to go to the hospital and offer the wreath as a mark of respect. So these ADCs in their smart uniforms, they took the wreath and they were entering the hospital. From the hospital, the announcement is being made that Indira Gandhi ko blood transfusion diya ja raha hai, sab kuch control mein hai. And here these guys are going with the wreath. These military attachés were beaten black and blue by the irate crowd. Total confusion. It is only at 6 o'clock in the evening that announcement was finally made that Indira Gandhi is no more. See, total confusion, total chaos, Now let me contrast this with what happened in America. In 1963, John Kennedy, a very charismatic president of America, when he was traveling in Dallas, Lee Harvey Oswald shot him at around 12:33. By 12:50, he was taken to the hospital. By 1 o'clock, the priest was called in because Kennedy was dead. By 1:15, the announcement was made on television that President Kennedy is no more. By 2 o'clock, the Vice President Lyndon Johnson was sworn in inside the plane, Air Force One. He was given the oath of the office because of security reasons. By 3 o'clock, the funeral gown dress to be worn by his wife, Jacqueline Kennedy, that was stitched. And by 6 o'clock, the invitation to attend the funeral ceremony has gone to the rest of the world, the heads of the other countries. This is another example where things, they assumed that anything may go wrong and therefore we have to be prepared. Now, after this, Indira Gandhi's death, many commissions were appointed, and all the kind of hefty reports were sort of made. If any one of their suggestions would have been implemented, her son would not have been blown to pieces. Rajiv Gandhi would not have been blown to pieces. What is the message? The point is, our focus is always how it happened rather than how we can, focus is on who did it rather than how it happened. We never focus ourselves on the preventive aspect. We often confuse between the urgent and important, unless the important becomes urgent. In many government offices, the envelopes have the stamp urgent, which means urgent means only if it is urgent, people have to attend. If it is important, you don't have to attend. Many years back, there was a one-page article in Harvard Business Review. The title of the article was, "Whose monkey is it?" And it quoted an example. There was this manager, a very efficient kind of a manager, and he would walk around every time and asking people, do you have any problem? And will offer the solutions. And suddenly what will happen is The moment somebody says, sir, I have a problem, immediately the guy will get into solving his problem. By implication, that monkey has been put on somebody else's head. Monkey is a metaphor for problem. First of all, the monkey has no business to climb your head. But because you did not solve important problems, this important problem has become urgent, and this monkey has gradually got emboldened, and the monkey is now sitting on your head. So that is the implication of the confusion between urgent and important. The next point is, we have a Titanic mindset. You know about Titanic, the ship which on its first maiden journey from Southampton to New York sunk. Nobody, including the captain, could believe that anything can happen to the Titanic. Now look at this COVID-19. Would anybody believe that this kind of a thing would happen, where over several million people would be dead, where the children's schools would be closed, where you and me are communicating through this kind of a medium, Zoom or Google Meet or Zoom? Nobody imagined. Things are changing so dramatically. We need to be prepared ourselves. How much time do we have? We have maybe another 10 minutes I will take. We can wax eloquent on delegation. Sorry, did anybody say anything?
No,
Is
sir,
it
go
okay if I
ahead.
continue for 10 minutes?
No, sir, please continue.
Yeah, okay. Now, all of you must have heard the word delegation. This must have been a topic of your subject also. Typically, it is said that delegation is from the boss to the subordinate. But India is such a unique country where you find upward delegation. Many a times you sort of write a mail, and in that mail there is a column called CC, and you CC to entire world. What is the mindset? That if things go wrong, don't blame me. I have informed the whole world. This is a kind of an upward kind of a delegation. You must have heard about C.K. Prahalad, one of the great management experts. He was the professor of Indian Institute of Management, and I was attending one of his sessions, and he showed us a film. And the title of the film was Manager Wanted. And in that film, they showed a smart manager. I think John was his name. Very efficient, very smart, very handsome, always there, available there for the subordinates. Every day morning, he will take a round, ask, have you any problems? Oh, this is very simple. This is the way, And this manager was on a deputation from Air Force. And his term was coming to an end. And he was to get back to Air Force. So he was looking for his successor. Now he has another junior, a guy whose name was Albert. Again, a very smart guy. Again, there was a rumor that as soon as John goes back to the Air Force, Albert will step into the shoes of the boss. And Albert was very helpful to people. He would, on his own, he will offer help to anybody who wants the help. So one day, John, that is a managing director, calls the secretary and says, please send Albert in. So the secretary dials Albert, says, boss wants to see you, and he winks at him, thinking that the boss is going to communicate to you the happy news that today onwards or tomorrow onwards, you are going to be the new managing director. Now, the boss, like all bosses, have some idiosyncrasies, some peculiar ways of behaving. And what was that? Whenever he wanted to communicate something unpleasant to you, he will call you by your first name, put a hand on your shoulder, and take you to the sofa and ask you, would you like to have some Coke or some soft drink or something? But if you have something pleasant to communicate to you, he will address you very formally. And Mr. So-and-so, please have a seat. There's no logic. There is no rhyme or reason. This is the way he will behave. So Albert knocks the door and, may I come in, sir? Says, hey, John, come in. Puts a hand on his shoulder and takes him to the sofa. And John, Albert, what would you like to have? Some coffee or soft drink? Now, Albert is a little confused. He said, this is not the way. If he has to communicate the pleasant, happy news, this is not the way he should address me. So he's a bit nervous. Then John says that, look, Albert, you know that my term is coming to an end. I was thinking as to who will take my position, and suddenly, and obviously your name came to my mind. But if you take my position, who will take your position? So Albert says, sir, there is this guy, there is that person, there is that person. He said, no, Albert, I checked with everybody. You were so helpful with everybody that you never allowed them to learn their job. If they can't do their job, how can they do your job? It is like, you never allowed the birds to fly. You always cut their wings. You know what I'm saying? The people have to learn. And the only way to learn is through delegation. You have to delegate people. Otherwise, you get into what I called here as driving the driver syndrome. What is driving the driver syndrome? Now, let me talk about your Professor Dash. Now, supposing if Professor Dash has been given a car by the university, that have a car. Now, his wife said that now that you got a car, you need to have a driver. So he appoints a driver. And on the first day, he sits next to the driver. The driver puts the key to the ignition. Suddenly the professor, no, itna जोर से नहीं चाबी इतना जोर से नहीं देना, ब्रेक इतना जोर से नहीं दबाना, क्लच इतना जोर से नहीं दबाना, तुम बहुत फास्ट चला रहे हो, तुम बहुत स्लो चला रहे हो. Then what happens? In the afternoon, Professor Dash starts driving the car, and the driver is sitting next to the driver, next to Professor Dash. And after 6 months, the driver says, Professor साहब बहुत अच्छा गाड़ी चलाता है. So, now, there is another example of mine. Now, Professor Dash should not feel bad. Let me give my own example. I have a cook in my house. So my wife is a very micromanaging kind of a lady. And now what happens is every morning when the cook comes, she starts micromanaging the cook. ना काटना नहीं, इतना जोर से काटना नहीं, इतना नमक नहीं डालना, इतना मिर्ची नहीं डालना, तुमको इडली बनाना नहीं आता, तुमको डोसा बनाने नहीं आता, तो बाजू हटो, मैं तुमको बताता हूँ. And last 6 months the cook has put on weight and he says कि मैन साहब बहुत अच्छा है, बहुत अच्छा इडली डोसा बनाता है. So this is the problem of delegation. You need to allow freedom for the people to commit mistakes. Only then they can learn. The next point is we cannot achieve synergy. 2 plus 2 socially does not make 4. They cancel each other because people lack that coordination. I wanted to show you a video clip, but unfortunately, this Google team is a third-rate kind of a video medium. I am not able to attach it properly, but let me explain that film to you. That there was a movie called The Beautiful People. This was not about people, but this was about the animals in the Kalahari Desert of Namibia. Namibia is a country in Africa, and in that film, they talk about the coordination between animals. So in that film, they show a small animal called honey badger. Honey badger. It's a small, sturdy animal. Now, when the mother gives birth to the baby, it abandons the baby in the desert. That's a natural way. Now the baby is completely confused. It doesn't know what to do, where to go, what food to eat. It is absolutely confused. A small sparrow-like bird is watching intently the movement of the baby. What it does is something amazing. The bird comes down, touches the nostril of the baby and flies up, touches the nostril and flies up again and again till the baby starts chasing the bird. The bird directs the baby to the beehive. The honey and the beehive is a natural food for the honey badger. The moment that smell of honey enters the nostrils of the baby, all its natural instincts come to surface. It starts eating the beehive, but eats only half of the beehive and honey, leaves the half to the waiting bird. This is what I call as interdependence. I ask people this question: what is the difference between a motley crowd of people traveling in a train or a bus or an auto rickshaw and a well-knit cohesive team? The difference is interdependence. In the team, there is appreciation of interdependence, whereas in a crowd, there is no appreciation of interdependence. If people ask this very simple question, what can I do to help you so that you can help me better, most of the problems of team building could be resolved. The next point, 1 minute, let me see. Yeah, let me just very briefly touch on this. This calls for what is the vision? What is the purpose of your existence? Many times I ask this question, who is your boss? And, and I ask this question to many managers across the globe. Who is your boss? And people tell me that managing director is my boss or my general manager is my boss. I then ask, who is the boss of your soul? And people get confused. Who is the boss of your soul? I have to be my own boss. And that can happen when I have the vision of the purpose of my existence. Why do I exist? Not because my parents have given me birth. There must be a larger purpose. Peter Drucker, the famous management expert, has given a beautiful example of the stone cutters. He found 3 stone cutters cutting the stone mechanically. He asked, what are you doing? The first stone cutter, in a very matter-of-fact fashion, replied, can't you see what I'm doing? I'm cutting the stone. The second stone cutter was very proud of his skills. He said, I am cutting the stone in the best possible fashion because I've studied in this and this institute. The third stone cutter, with a visionary gleam in his eyes, responded that I am building a church. Now, Peter Drucker says that the first one was a wage earner. The second one had confidence about his skills, but the third one had true managerial and entrepreneurial abilities because he knew the larger purpose of cutting the stone. He said, I'm not cutting the stone per se, but I'm helping the organization achieve its objective. The next point is, we need to think out of the box. We need to think out of the box. Nothing better example comes to my mind than this was told to me by a vice chancellor of a university, that this class was of 8th standard, and the teacher asked a question, boys, you have a barometer with you. You have to measure the height of the building. Now tell me, how will you measure the height of the building? One student said that, sir, I will go to the rooftop. Now the typical answer is you take the barometric pressure at the ground floor, barometric pressure at the top, do the calculation and give the height of the building. This boy responded saying that, sir, I will go to the top of the building and I will throw the barometer down. As soon as somebody catches, I will measure the time interval, do the calculation and will give the height of the building. The teacher got insulted. He said, give me the correct answer. What is correct is not what you think, but what I have been told to me as the correct answer. So the boy said, ठीक है सर, मैं नीचे आ जाऊंगा, किसी को ऊपर चढ़ा दूंगा और नीचे से ऊपर फेंक दूंगा. जैसे वो कैच कर लेगा, I will measure the height of the building. The teacher said, you guy, you are becoming very smart. Now, last chance, give me a correct answer. You know what boy said? Sir, I will press the call bell and ask for the owner. And as soon as the owner comes, I will ask him, sir, please tell me the height of your building. I will give you this barometer as a gift. Now, this boy was refusing to be very conventional. He was thinking out of the box. And I think this is what we need to have the ability. I will talk a little bit about the last 2 points. We are trapped in activity orientation. Typically, our focus is on activities and not on results. This is also a problem in team building. You would have seen in the newspapers, the job descriptions come. Most of the job descriptions focus only on activities. We require a manager to do this, 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 this. Activities are different from results. You may do all the activities, but at the end of the day, what you produce is what matters. Activity orientation is what is very important. And lastly, we must have the paradigm shift. All of you must have heard about Stephen Covey, the famous management expert who just passed away a couple of last month. I think he passed away. Stephen Covey talks about the paradigm shift, and he gives a beautiful example in his book. He says that he was in New York, and every morning around 7 o'clock, She would take a metro and go to work. Now in the morning, generally people doze in the train, or some people read the newspaper. Very silent kind of an atmosphere. So when Stephen Covey had boarded the train, in the next station, a family of a man with 3, 4 children, very noisy children, running here, there, shouting, and this man was keeping quiet. Everybody got disturbed. He said, "What is this? The man has not really trained his children nicely. Look at children, they're making noise, disturbing everybody. And the man is absolutely keeping quiet." So Stephen Covey tapped on that man's shoulder. He said, "Gentlemen, these are your children?" He said, "Yeah." "They're making so much of noise." He got actually very angry, but he controlled his anger and said, "Can't you control them?" So the man opened his eyes and said, "Look, we are now coming from the hospital. 45 minutes back, the children have lost their mother. I have lost my wife, and the children are very confused. They don't know how to manifest their sorrow. I myself do not know what I do, and that is the reason." Now, a moment back, Stephen Covey's mind was full of anger. Suddenly, it had a 360-degree turn, and it was full of sympathy, empathy, a concern. This is paradigm shift. People need to have this kind of paradigm shift. It is very easy to think from my perspective, but you become an effective entrepreneur when you start thinking from somebody else's perspective. Can I put myself into your shoes and think from your point of view? If you do that, then you become the entrepreneur. I started the presentation with the roast pig problem of the China. I hope you have not forgotten that, because there is a second moral to the story. If somebody wants to eat roast pork and continue eating roast pork, you need to go whole hog. Means you need to continuously make an effort to build teams. It is like putting a stone in a pond. You need to continuously put the stone in the pond so that the waves touch the shore. That is the essence of team building. That is the essence of entrepreneurship. Today, this country requires not employees. Today, this country requires employers. And that is what our Prime Minister is talking about when he talks about Atmanirbhar. Forget about depending on anybody else. We would create our own wealth. We would create our own businesses. And I think this is the message that you, these MBA students and BBA students, had to carry forward. Fortunately, the atmosphere is very conducive for all of us to create an enterprise. And in that process, whatever help that you require from our side, we are always there. So I'm very, very thankful to you. I think I've exceeded by. So thank you very much. And here I will stop sharing.
Sir, thank you so much. Really,
Okay.
I am also mesmerized. When Mr. Parthasarathi talk about you, and when
Okay.
I invited him, he told he
Hmm.
talk to my mentor. He will be the best
Okay.
BPT person. And you contact him. That's why I
Okay.
contacted you. And believe me, sir, I am
Okay.
mesmerized. So, and
Thank you.
really, it is a tremendous speech, and it's so practical. It's so hands-on support you provided to the students. I hope they must have really
Okay.
understood what exactly you intend to speak them. And it was
Right,
really
right,
the
right.
best speech in the entire orientation schedule, sir. Honestly speaking.
Okay, thank you.
So,
Would anybody have any
okay.
questions, or anybody has any questions, or we can stop?
Sir, they have not asked any questions, and they are also mesmerized.
Okay,
So,
okay, okay,
okay,
okay,
sir.
okay,
Sir, I will invite you once
okay.
more, sir.
Right. Thank you. Thank you
Whenever
very
I
much.
can.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Okay, sir. Thank you so much,
Anytime,
sir. Thank you so much.
anytime.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, sir.
Thank you.
I will send you the link, sir. Okay, students, I hope you have enjoyed the entire session. Hello?
Yes, sir.